Happy Tuesday night, everybody, and welcome to the Nana Boss Continuum. Please welcome my wonderful guest, Mr. Alex Petakov, is here with me tonight. So sorry, I had a little bit of difficulties with the internet going on, so apologize for the tardiness, but we are here and we are going to have a good time. Alex, thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Glad to hear everything got sorted out there.
I know, I don't know, man. It's the
They knew you
the
were having me on,
three-letter
so they're like, "We
agency.
got to stop." Yeah.
And I tonight I was so excited about having you on. I watch everything Small Town Monsters does. And then when you guys were in Lakeland at the Lakeland conference, and I saw you guys and I was watching you guys and I was just like, and I kept saying to Matt, I was like, I want to go over and I want to say hi. I want to go over and I want to say hi, but I'm not, he's like, well, go, go, go. And I'm like, no, no, no. I was so terrified to come over and talk to you guys.
Oh, we're
And then
just
here you
just
are on my
normal dudes,
show.
just normal guys. No, nothing intimidating.
Yeah, I think you guys are amazing. You guys do such amazing work, and so I really wanted to talk to you about tonight. You talk about your encounters on so many shows. I really wanted to get down to the meat and potatoes of what it's like with when you guys go on the road. What it's really like for you. Like, are you guys like literally going from campsite to campsite to campsite, and then once in a blue moon you'll go to a hotel for a shower? Like, I want to know exactly what it's like, what goes into making one of these amazing films that we all love so much.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both of that. I mean, there's been times where, we haven't showered in like 2 weeks, just because of just being out there. It gets crazy. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed experience. I mean, depending on if I'm kind of doing a solo thing or if I'm with other folks as well, as we've often done. Whether it's Eli or Tate Hieronymus or
Right.
other people, other researchers that we might be working with. So like when we were down in Florida, we did some stuff with the Outcast Paranormal guys.
Hmm.
And this was back last winter, so it kind of depends. I mean, it's really all over the place, but usually, yeah, the hotel stays or anything like that, it's not like a big TV production where they go out in the woods and they go to the hotel at night. It's not usually like that. There's been a few times, but just because, it's like towards the tail end of a trip or something, I try to at least get a shower and sleep in a bed before I leave. Like if I'm flying out somewhere, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be that guy in the airplane that smells like he's been out in the woods for 2 weeks. Because believe me, people notice. I mean, when you're out in the woods, you get used to your own smell,
So you don't
especially,
get it.
yeah, once you're past like the 4 or 5 day mark, especially if it's humid or hot summertime, you don't smell yourself until somebody new comes in the mix and they're like, whoa, you know, it happens. I mean, it's just kind of funny. So yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, the schedules can be crazy. Like that, specifically that Florida trip we did was probably the craziest one ever. I think there's a
Really?
reason we don't do them that way anymore, because of the way things kind of went. Because
Yeah.
we basically, I mean, for folks that are familiar, we did like 4 episodes in Florida back in January of 2022. So last January, it's just a
Hmm.
little over a year ago. We basically drove from Miami to North Georgia mountains in the span of like 2.5, 3 weeks, and did all this stuff in between. So we were in the Everglades. We did the Big Cypress National Preserve area for a few days. Then we were up in the Green Swamp, Lakeland. We went to that Bigfoot conference,
Hmm.
the Florida Bigfoot conference. Then we were up in Ocala National Forest for a few days, and then we were up on the Panhandle for a few days, and then we drove all the way to the North Georgia mountains, and it rained for 3 days straight, and it was miserable. And it was just like this whirlwind, because I mean, there was we stayed at maybe, I want to say we stayed at 2 Airbnbs, so 2 nights in Airbnb and one hotel stay of like almost 3 weeks. So
Wow.
there you have it. Yeah, there was like a day in between. Before the conference, we made sure to get a shower before then. Again, after
Hmm.
being in the woods for almost a week at that point. So it's just been all over the place. I mean, with all the different trips, it just really depends on where we're at. But usually, it's campgrounds and sleeping in the car. Even that sometimes I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah.
So it depends. I mean, it's all over the place. It's wild.
Yeah. Now, because you guys all get along really, really well. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do, a
Sometimes.
filming schedule like that, right? But I mean, yeah, well, yeah, you guys probably, I mean, there has to be sometimes when you guys are kind of like, hey, no, let's do this, let's do that. Is that kind of how it goes down a little bit? But then you guys seem to really gel nicely together on that team, you
Yeah, I
know?
think it's the more time you spend with somebody, the more likely you are to get into arguments, and just you're in high
Mhm.
stress situations,
Close
running around the woods for
quarters.
a few weeks. Yeah, so things can get a little bit testy, I think, with kind of anyone. Really,
Yeah.
I mean, anyone you're out with for that amount of period, you'll have something going on. So, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we would get along for the most part. And again, it depends on who. I'm usually, with other researchers. We're meeting up with
Mhm.
local people. There's a lot of time where we're going to, I want to link up with people that are in these areas and talk to them. I'm not going to go to some area and just assume I know everything about it. So if I have if I have a contact in a place that I want to go to, then hey, yeah, let them take us to their spot, or they can take us to their research area or a place they might recommend. So we
Mhm.
try to collaborate with other people as much as we can. I think that just adds a cool element to it and allows us to meet a lot of really neat researchers. And so far, we've met so many in so many different places that it's been fantastic. And you kind of become a team then with that person or multiple people along with your own self and other folks you might have brought along. So it kind of becomes its own sort of thing for that time period, which is really cool.
So, and if you can just tell me, if you could choose one, if you could choose one area that you guys went to and you felt like if we had stayed just a little bit longer, we might have got something. Which area do
uh,
you think that would be? If you, okay, I'll give you
it's a
two.
tough
You can give me
question.
two. You can
I
give me
will.
two.
I think I can give you a one answer. I mean, I got to say, a lot of the places we've been to amazing. Would I absolutely love to return. Places like Bluff Creek or
Yeah.
the mountain range in Utah, High Uintas. We had some activity. Parts of Florida. There's a lot of places, but probably so-called Area A. So the cabin in the Alaskan coastal Sasquatch. That's definitely a place where I think we were
Mm,
there for almost 8 days, basically around eight,
mm,
8 or 9 days. I mean, give and take a day in a 2 days for travel. So about a week in there, but that's an area where definitely I'd like to focus in on more. And we actually do have plans.
oh,
I'm going to be
good.
spending probably 2 weeks out there this summer. So just
That is
increasing the time. And I think we had a lot of stuff go on. And I think if we spent more time, maybe there'd be more. I mean, I don't want to assume, but
right.
there's a lot of stuff we want to try that we didn't get to try last time. And
Mhm,
obviously, in hindsight, you get to kind of look back and say, all right, I would have done this differently. I would have done that. But
mhm,
it almost kind of acts as like a scouting trip. So you can kind of figure out where to improve and what you'd
mhm.
like to actually try for next time. So Area A is probably top on my list just because of the activity and the reputation, the history it has, and some of the stuff we experienced out there. I mean, in the span of a week, there was quite a lot of things that happened that were, I can't say 100% were Bigfoot, but were very interesting, kind of
Yeah.
fitting in that pattern. So that's an area that probably is top of my list. But I mean, if somebody told me, "Hey, go back to Bluff Creek for a week," I mean, it's hard to argue with that. But
Right.
obviously, there's other places I'd like to go, and we try to mix it up with locations and that sort of thing.
Was there anything that happened while you were in, up in area A? Was there anything that happened or a series of things or anything that didn't make the film that you felt like was just not, it was activity, but you couldn't quite, so it didn't make the film? Was there anything like that?
Honestly, there really isn't. There pretty much everything that happened that was major
Investigated.
is in the film, and we didn't have anything potentially activity-wise that we didn't really put in there.
Mhm.
It was pretty, the stuff, the most of the stuff that doesn't end up making the cut is just, if we have footage of us talking or goofing off or something like that. Sometimes we'll do these outtakes, and I'll throw in like a 10-minute blooper reel kind of thing at the end because a lot of crazy stuff happens when you're out. I mean, somebody
Right.
drops the camera, something funny happens, whatever.
Yeah.
But in terms of activity, no, there's nothing that happened that we didn't put in there, or that I wanted to make sure everything that we kind of documented made it in there. Um, there were things I wish we could have included more. So, for example, when we did there was like a thermal video that was taken a couple weeks before we went out there by the
Mhm.
property owner and a guy who was legally blind. I mean,
Wow.
he's like, he has peripheral vision, and he filmed this thing on this thermal. And the property owner, Scott, didn't really, he's like, oh, you don't know what you're seeing. And then later, upon reviewing the footage, they see just this signature up in the tree. We didn't get to, well, we did record it, but we didn't get that footage backed up. And so the thermal was left at the cabin. And when I started editing this, like the film was in October or something like that. So cabin's closed off for the season. We're not going to be back there till the spring. So that footage
It'll
was
be in
essentially
part 2, right?
yeah, I mean, but that, because it was just a comparison footage. It was, so the footage that we didn't get to put in was just, we had, Rob Roy, who was in there standing up at the top of the hill, and he was just like our stand-in for the weird footage they had. So we had the footage on screen, but we didn't have the comparison. A lot of people are like, oh, why didn't you have the comparison? I'm like, when you're taking care of so many things, you forget to transfer one little piece of footage, and then you're kind of kicking yourself in the butt 6 months later when you're editing the film. There's really nothing I could have done. But like I said, there's nothing else really activity wise that didn't make the cut.
Mhm.
If there was, I mean, if there was any other activity, I would have just made the films even longer. I mean, they were both, part 1 and part 2 were like an hour and a half long each. So
Yeah.
they were both pretty long, and it documented pretty much our whole journey out there. And there's actually going to be basically a whole kind of series sort of thing dedicated to that site when I go
Oh,
back over the
nice.
2-week span. So it'll be, I think it won't be, documenting 4 or 5 days in a single film. It'll be more, here's what happened day 1 and day 2,
Yeah.
and kind of the progression. So it'll cover the whole sort of span, but in a different way than I think these films did.
Yeah, I think that, when you guys I totally get when you're talking about, like, you've got all of this footage and and you because you guys are out on location for, like, so many, so much time. I mean, does it normally take you about, like, 6 months to start working on a project like that? Like
No, not necessarily. That was so, because of the way it worked was we kind of try to do these end of the year releases that are some of the bigger adventures, I guess, of the
Mm,
year. And
gotcha.
so the series that I do, Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, it's mostly out on YouTube. But Seth Breedlove of Small Town Monsters also does the On the Trail of Bigfoot films. So we did this for the first time in 2021, where we were in the Olympic Peninsula out in Washington, and it kind of just happened organically. Like, we didn't really plan this out, but then it kind of became a blueprint for what we would do at the end of each year, which I think is really cool.
Mhm.
Seth does the On the Trail Bigfoot film, and that's more about the researchers and very interview heavy. It's not so much as investigative as my stuff is. So we happen to both be there in the Olympics with the Olympic project, looking at the so-called nest sites that they have out there. And I was filming my project. Seth is doing his film. And then the idea was, well, when we release the film On the Trail of Bigfoot on like the DVD, we'll also include the Bigfoot Beyond the Trail. So my film, that kind of comes as part of the DVD, like a bonus kind of thing. And the idea was also, well, you have stuff coming out on YouTube for YouTube audiences, and then you have a film that's going to other
Right.
platforms. So Amazon streaming, Tubi, a lot of people see it on there,
Mhm.
and those kind of sites. So it's different audiences, but the idea is, well, you can watch one or the other separately and get a pretty good idea of what's going on. But if you happen to see one and you watch the other one, then you'll get like a more an overview. So Seth's films typically are more overview, and then you watch my stuff and it's more of like a deep dive focus. So we did that first year in 2021, and then in like November, December released the Olympic project, kind of Bigfoot Beyond the Trail and the On the Trail Bigfoot. So we wanted to do that again. So while we were in Alaska, while myself and the rest of the crew were at the cabin, Seth and the other part of the STM crew was out in Alaska filming interviews and doing a lot of stuff. So we then chose to again release that. So we'd film that in May, but because it's not coming out until the end of the
Gotcha.
year, that was like a project I had to set aside while I'm doing other videos, which is actually really
Yeah.
difficult because it's so tempting to want to edit the Alaska stuff, but I had other stuff that we had filmed immediately after that, like when we went to West Virginia or when I went solo to Tennessee, and that stuff was coming out more immediate. So I had to wait until the fall to actually start editing the Alaskan coastal Sasquatch. So that was the idea. kind of having the joint releases and doing the same thing with the DVD, and again having it be two projects that are related that you can watch separately, but also if you watch them together, you're just going to get a more kind of overview of the whole topic. So like with the Alaska one, Seth's film focuses heavily on Alaska stories, and there's also interviews with us about our experiences at the cabin, but it's just a little portion of it. And then if you watch the Bigfoot Beyond the Trail from there, you get a much larger kind of, or much more zoomed in view on that particular case you might have just heard mentioned in the other film. So it's kind of, like I said, it sort of just happened by accident that we just decided that, and it kind of worked. And we're like, oh, this is a cool idea to do stuff for year-end release films and videos. So we're going to try that again this year. We're going to British Columbia in a few months here. So that'll be kind of the On the Trail of Bigfoot, the origins. So it's sort of, the origins of the whole Sasquatch story. And, I have some stuff I'm going to be working on in British Columbia as well. And it'll be related, but kind of their own distinct things, but definitely gives you more of a broader view of a topic.
Well, I wanted to also, I have been wanting to do a show about drones for so long. I mean, I really have, but I thought I would save that question, and maybe you and I could kind of dive a little bit down into drones, because I know that, I mean, oh my goodness, you guys get some of the most beautiful shots and just majestic areas and all of that. But I also know that, especially here in Florida, because both of my sons love to play around with drones. I mean, you just can't fly a drone anywhere you want, and it's so how do you guys work around those type of constraints? How do you guys kind of figure that out?
So yeah, there's a lot you can kind of do with drones. They're awesome tools. I'll just say first off, they're incredible for just even scouting. Like if you want to just say, all right, I want to see what's up over this little mountain peak here, and I can't see it on my own. So let me just take the drone up. Oh, there's a swamp in there. I want to go hike in there. Gives you some cool opportunities, but also just cinematically gives you the ability to get shots that would be, impossible to get otherwise. So when it comes to regulations, there's a ton of rules and regulations about drones, and I'm not an expert or legal. Don't take this as legal advice. Do your own research, kind of disclaimer. But generally, national parks in the United States, it is illegal to fly drones in. It's banned. Very few exceptions. There's a permitting process, but it's probably more expensive than it is worth to actually do, especially for just independent guys. We're doing stuff on shoestring budgets. We're not, out there really able to afford, if they want to charge like $500 a day for just filming, that's a little bit out of our budget, because that money goes elsewhere. Transport, that sort of thing. Travel gets expensive nowadays, unfortunately. But so you have national parks, and then there's the thing with national forests so most national forests in the U.S., technically it is allowed. You are allowed to fly drones. It depends. There may be certain regulations. Wilderness areas, so there's designated wilderness areas within national forests, and those are off limits because those are protected areas where there's no vehicles of any kind allowed. So even those are kinds of places where I don't even think, maybe bikes are the only kind of vehicle you might even be able to take in there. So they're specifically, like for example, the Ocala National Forest, I think, has a few, maybe a couple or three designated wilderness areas. And those are areas where there's no roads, you can't get cars in, you can only really hike in, that sort of thing. I know up in my neck of the woods here in New Hampshire, in the White Mountain National Forest, we have 3 or 4 of these designated wilderness areas, and they can be thousands of acres. It depends. So you're not allowed to take a drone off in or outside. Like you can't even, hypothetically, if I was outside the boundary and I flew my drone and flew it over it, that technically also is not allowed. So there's that. So there's also state parks. Usually most states don't allow it. So it depends. Florida, for example, state parks, state forest, no drones allowed. Yep.
Nope.
Whereas Louisiana or Mississippi, you are technically allowed in some state parks. You need to follow the regulations regardless, because you have federal rules, then you have state rules, and also oftentimes local ordinances. So, it's, for example, I'm just getting my phone here because I'm looking at the one of the apps I use here, which is called before you fly.
That's
So
yes, that's the one
yep.
that that's the one
Oh
that
no,
I've
it's
checked
not
out.
focusing. But this is basically a
Yeah, that's a good
a
app.
map that you would look. So essentially, let's say I'm going to go to, the Ocala National Forest area, and they're going to tell me, oh, you can't do stuff here, or I can click on, let's say I want to click on a particular area, and in the warning, it'll probably give me caution, review active advisories for a compliant operation. And then there's other areas where it tell you're cleared, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're clear, because if there's a local ordinance that says you aren't allowed to
Mm,
fly, it's tough. Like, bottom line is, be really careful. There's licensing with becoming a certified drone pilot. There's
right.
all sorts of stuff you have to register. Even if you're not a pilot, you have to register your drones. So I mean, I actually
Mhm.
have two of my drones up here on this shelf. Um, one of the older ones, a DJI Mavic, doesn't really work so well anymore. I recently got a new one. Also DJI, excuse me, Mavic Air, and they're just amazing. They've gotten smaller and smaller. I've been flying drones now since 2017, I believe. I started out with the DJI Phantom, which is this really big white one that has these giant awkward legs and is not very portable, but I still used to strap it to my backpack and hike it up mountains just to be able to fly in certain areas.
Yeah.
So I think for our purposes, we're lucky that a lot of the places we go to are national forests. So generally, in moderation, drone flying is allowed. And again, don't quote me on that. There may be local places or certain forests
Right.
where that's, like I said, designated wilderness areas, all that kind of thing. You really want to be careful to make sure you're complying with all that sort of stuff. But I mean, what's the bummer is a place like Florida, right? The Big Cypress Preserve.
Yes.
It's flat. You have these tree hammocks in these prairie areas where wildlife comes out. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had a thermal drone, this would be the ideal type of terrain to see something in if you're just flying
Mhm.
around, whatever, at night. We tried using a thermal drone at the cabin in Alaska. We had access to one there, and the issue was being so rugged and mountainous with the terrain that we had one of our team members, Ron, walk up into the hill, and we're filming him at night with the thermal drone. He goes behind the trees and basically disappears. I mean, it's that Pacific Northwest style of temperate rainforest.
Mhm.
So uh, not much use there. Whereas maybe a place like Florida, especially South Florida, with those prairies and those plains in between the
Mhm.
forests, there may be a good chance to get some footage, but you can't. A place like Big Cypress, you just can't even, because it's
No.
a national preserve, which is also run by the Department of the Interior. That's the same
Right.
people who administer national parks. So it's not allowed. And as much as it sucks. I mean, you could get in trouble for flying a drone in those areas. You get fined or whatever, that sort of
Yeah,
things.
nobody wants to go to jail just to try to get
No.
an alligator on film or maybe
Yeah.
a Sasquatch, you know?
And I know it trust me, I get it. It's
Yeah.
garbage, because as researchers, you're thinking, well, what's the best advantage? But then you have to
Yeah.
deal with that sort of thing. That if you get in trouble, I mean, that's nobody wants to get in trouble for something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
drones are awesome. Unfortunately, I think as they become more prolific, they're kind of all over the place now. There probably is going to be more rules and regulations. I remember even back in 2017 when, I mean, the drones had been out for a couple of years at that point. That's just when I
Mhm.
started using them. It was like a Wild West period. It was kind of like the internet in the old days, where there wasn't really any rules. You kind of made them up as you went along. There was a
Right.
lot less regulation. And as drones become more and more accessible and they get smaller and smaller and more usable, you have to you have people abusing that. Most people fly normally and they learn
Mhm.
about the regulations and how they have to do things. But then I've seen people flying drones on crowded bridges with tons of people around and flying it right low past people's heads. I mean,
Right.
I've been hit with a drone before going full speed, and it'll leave marks in you. I had a drone crash into my chest as I was sitting down. Eli crashed it into my chest because he was landing and it was almost dark, and it, like, if it was a couple inches higher, I mean, it would have
Yeah.
chopped part
Yeah.
of my face off. I mean, I had some
And
cuts on my chest from
wow.
that. So it was, yeah, they're
Yeah,
no
that's really
joke.
tricky.
So people abuse that, and then we all get punished for it collectively, which
Mhm.
really is unfortunate. So I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot more rules regarding drones, and the amount of places you're going to be able to go to will be limited more and more. I mean, especially urban areas. I never really fly in like cities or towns anyway, but
Mhm.
as I said, luckily we're mostly in these really rural areas that are national forests and that sort of thing, or just unmarked land, logging for private land, that sort of thing. So
Right, right.
it's different, but a lot of other places are, you have to really be careful and learn about, before you fly and that sort of thing. And that's a federal app. And then you've got local things you got to worry about. So it can be a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to drone usage.
Yeah, it really can. I mean, and it's also too especially like here in Florida. I mean, a lot of these areas, they belong to, the Native American tribes, and
Right.
their laws are very different too. So that adds a whole other layer that they made their like their laws and their regulations that they have could be not even on that app, right?
Right.
Like
That's
you have to
exactly right.
really got to do your research. You really have to I mean, that's why I wanted to do a show on drones. Like I really wanted to get into like the deep part of it, because it really, people are just like, "Oh yeah, like let's just throw up a drone, and why didn't they get this or that or whatever?" Because sometimes your hands are tied sometimes, and
Yeah.
and
I think that was
but
the number one criticism we had for one of our recent Florida films. And I noticed from the comments too, oh, if only you guys had a drone. And I'm
mm,
thinking to myself, me too. Trust me.
oh, right, me too.
In the moment, I hear a tree go crashing in the woods behind me, and Tate and I are both sitting there saying, "Dude, I wish we had a drone, or we had drones, but I wish we could use them here. Couldn't.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of unfortunate. But I actually have both of my drones right up here. If you want me to pull them down,
Yes.
I can grab them. Just give me 1 second here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for everybody for being here tonight.
All right, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is an example of a DJI Phantom or DJI Mavic. I think this is the original Mavic. So I got this one actually in 2017 or 2018. So I think I've actually been flying since 2015 or 16. If I got this one in 2017. So basically, unfolded, this is kind of what it looks like. So what's really nice is, because of the size, you can fold it up and carry it in your
Mhm.
backpack and whatever in a little case. So essentially, this is kind of next to my head for a comparison there.
Yeah.
So pretty small, pretty stealthy still compared to some of the older drones. And this one has the remote that looks like this. So with this guy, what you do is you would take your smartphone and you connect it onto here. So it kind of looks like this.
Oh, cool. So you can see
Yeah.
everything that
So
you're.
essentially, this is your screen. This is what you're seeing as you're flying. And up
Mhm.
here is just like some basic control stuff. Pretty good. I like this controller because it's portable. It's very small. So it goes, I mean, that's
Oh,
essentially the
wow.
size when you fold it all
That's
up.
yeah.
So this is, like I said, this is the 2017 DJI Mavic Pro. So that would have been one that I used pretty much up until even just that Alaska trip, and then it's just started going haywire. It flies really weird. I probably could get it fixed, but it's an older drone. The picture quality is 2017, so it's kind of stuck in that time period. So the recent one is the DJI Mavic Air 2S. Yes, the Air 2S. It literally says it there on the side.
Oh, wow.
So
So
this guy is even smaller. Actually, it's lighter, a little bit lighter than that last one, but basically same sort of thing. Folds out. And so there you have it. And the wings, by the way, are kind of just, they go like that. But once you take off, they unfold themselves. So there's that size. And I'll take the other one we kind of compare on here. So here's the 2017, and here's
it is,
the new one. So you can kind of see a little bit, maybe there.
smaller, a little sleeker, a little,
Yeah,
yeah.
more lightweight. I mean, it's got a different camera system on there, but basically once you take this guy off here, then you have your gimbal, and that's the camera where that's going to be getting your shots of everything there.
Wow.
And that's what gives you the really extreme stabilization, that kind of thing. And on my drone, I have my FAA registration on the side, and that sort of thing. And if my phone number, if it crashes, reward if you find this. That way I can kind of
Oh,
locate it. So it's really, they recommend marking the drones on the side, because that way, if you do crash somewhere, I think the idea is if you crash in some sensitive military installation, they know who to come after, basically. But I guess if you lost it in a park and somebody found it. Now, this guy, I think the drone improved a lot in terms of portability, size. I mean, just a little bit lighter, but
hmm.
the remote grew actually a little bit compared to the other one. So let's see, I'm trying to, my desk is filled with drones now. So this is the new controller, and this one, it's a big chunky kind of controller, and it actually has the knobs built into the bottom, so you have to take them out and screw them on to be able to have your kind of
Okay.
controls. But it is sleek in one sense, that once you put that away, you don't have any protruding kind of knobs as you
Right. That
would
can
with.
break off or
Yeah, so this
yeah.
one, these guys are permanent on here with this, so
Hmm.
can't take those off. Now, this guy also uses your phone, but how this one works is that I would take this top part out. This is the antenna and the phone holder, so they kind of combine those. So this is essentially how this would look.
Oh, that's
So you have
cool.
your phone. Again, you're using your phone. There are some models that have a built-in screen that kind of connects directly to the drone.
Hmm.
Then the idea is you don't have to worry about your phone battery dying. I've had situations where my battery is at 20%. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I'm trying to get ready to fly, and
Oh no.
you have to kind of be aware of that. So that's what that setup looks. So
Mhm.
again, comparing it to the other one, which unfolded looks like this.
Wow.
So,
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
there's a bit of a difference. So there's a trade-off. They took some
Yes.
good things from the old one and put it into the newer ones. And there's a lot of different models. This is just the one I've been using lately, and I enjoy it a lot. They're awesome.
And then does the film quality, did the film quality like, did it get better with the newer
Yeah.
drone with the better camera and
Oh yeah. It just looks better because, I mean, I can even show you here. So this is the older one. You see the
Mhm.
size of the camera there? I mean, it's
Oh
virtually
yeah.
the size of my finger, tiny, right?
Yeah.
2017, and here is the newer one. So it's just I don't know if I can even compare them, but it's just a
Yeah.
newer, better camera, because
Mhm.
the technology gets better every few years. I mean, they're always innovating. So that picture quality is 4K, yes, but it's 2017 4K versus 2022 4K. I mean, it's just going to progress and just get better and look better over
Right,
time.
right.
So yeah, I mean, they work great. They have the batteries pop right off on the back, and you can fly
And
for about
then
25, 30 minutes at times.
so what do you actually keep your footage on? Like it's like an SD card? Is
Yeah.
it like
Yeah.
what
So you
is
have right here on the side, you have a little SD port, and then
Mhm.
your, if I can get it out. Well, this is hard with no fingernails. It's kind of like a push. There we go. So you got little micro SDs.
Wow.
So this
And how
one
much
is
footage can one of those hold?
a lot. This is a 128
Wow.
gigabyte
That's a lot.
card. So a lot of footage. Yeah. And the idea is if I'm out for like a week, I don't want to have to worry about running out of space. And if I'm just
Right.
filming 20, 30 minutes a day, I don't have to really worry about that instead of carrying around. I mean, I will carry around extra cards as well, but just to have a primary one, so you don't really have to worry about it. That's also a consideration when we're out there so often. If we're not being able to back up footage, a lot of film productions, they usually back up footage daily once they're
Mhm.
done filming, because they're back in the comfort of a hotel or an Airbnb. And
Right.
obviously, we can't do that necessarily as much. But yeah, like I said, they're awesome. The technology is just going to get better and better. This guy, like I said, when it's folded up, it is really quite compact. I mean, it's like
Does it
maybe.
make a lot of sound? Does it make any noise at all? Is it super quiet?
Yeah, it does make noise. The 2017 one definitely more so than the newer one, but that's just part of it. I mean, they get quieter and quieter. I feel like every year with the technology.
Mhm.
So you can still hear it, especially if it's close by. But if it's up in the air, I mean, it's not that
Not
noticeable,
disturbing
especially
wildlife or
a couple hundred feet in the air. I mean, legally, you can really only fly to about 400 feet. in most
Mm-hmm.
areas, pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's the FAA, so the Federal Aviation Administration's ceiling, I guess we could
Mm-hmm.
call it, for drones, because above that point, you're worried about
You're in
doing with
air traffic,
helicopters.
right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend typically going above that unless you have some super special permission or
So
something along those lines.
when you're flying the drones, right, in areas that you're allowed to, have you ever been in areas where either, because, we always hear about people talking about equipment failures, or all of a sudden their files get deleted or their files get zapped or have you ever experienced, you've been doing this a long time, have you ever experienced any kind of that kind of phenomena?
So not necessarily. I mean, there's been times where, I mean, you deal with just normal equipment failures all the
Mm.
time. Forget to charge something. I mean, there's so many million little things I got to charge and be
Yeah.
keep track of, whether it's thermal cameras or the actual cameras, the
Mm.
camcorders, the drones, the GoPros, all that stuff. But I mean, with Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, I don't remember an instance really where we had. Well, actually, there's one where we had like a really strange equipment failure that I can recall at the moment. The one we did have was out in the Florida Panhandle when we were with kind of the outcast paranormal guys, and Eli was actually with, I think, RPG at the time, and we were hearing stuff that night. There was Stacy and a bunch of other folks from that group.
Mhm.
There was a bunch of us that basically, and myself and Tate Hieronymus as well, and Eli, and we were all kind of in one area. And Eli and RPG went off to the side, and they were hearing something moving in the woods. It turned out to be an armadillo, but we did hear some knocks. And at one point, Eli had kind of, I guess, panned to the side, and they had heard this knock, and the IR torch that we had on top of that camera just like went dead for whatever reason. It
Hmm.
wouldn't turn back on, even though it was. I'm pretty sure it was freshly charged. Like that's, I think, what we determined
Wow.
when that was going on. So it was a little bit weird, but the camera didn't die itself. It was just the IR torch, and it was like right when they
So
pointed it into the direction of the woods, there was this kind of knock like noise, and it kind of went dead. I don't know how to explain that. I mean, Tate the
right.
night before, Tate and another guy James had witnessed this weird orb thing flying through the trees, and they had heard wood knocks that night. So it was a strange kind of trip, but um,
But other
I
than that, nothing.
just wanted to show real quick. Just here's the
Oh yeah.
comparison between the two. So I can hold them like this, and you'll see
Oh yeah.
one and two. So
Right.
older one and newer one. But
Yep.
anyway,
No, it's so, thank you so much for sharing that, because like I said, I feel like, drone footage is very prevalent. It's very, in people's, I'm seeing it in people's research. I'm
oh
seeing
yeah,
people, I mean, it's really, really, really becoming kind of almost like one of those gotta haves in your backpack when you're going researching. But, I mean, if you but like I said, if you definitely have to do your research, right? Like we talked
yeah.
about, you got to do your research and make sure that you're not going to get in any trouble, local, state, federal laws. You got to do that, do your research. But I mean, I think a lot more people are really starting to kind of get into drones. Are they easy to operate? I mean, is it something that you really got to take your time and learn it? Is it something, I mean, my grandson, I'm going to just tell you right now, I have a grandson who has been flying drones since he's like probably 3, I think, 3 or 4. Like, I kid you not. Like, he can, I don't know how he does it. I don't. He I watch him and I mean, he can do anything with it. Anything. So it's like I feel like, and me, I'm all phones. I couldn't play, video games to save my life, let alone fly a drone, but I feel like it takes some time to get used to and figure it out, right?
You'd be surprised. I mean, the first time I ever flew my drone, I was super worried, and I went to this wide open soccer field with grass, and I didn't fly it higher than 10 feet. And I'm thinking, oh my god. And then, a few months later, you're flying it over a boat or doing some crazy
Mhm.
kind of stuff that you wouldn't have done. They're really easy to fly. I mean, with these guys, you can basically, there's so many different modes. You can have it track you, follow you. If you're in a moving vehicle or a boat, you could just have it
Oh,
hover.
cool.
I
I
mean, there's
didn't
all
know
these,
that.
they're so easy to operate. I mean, I think even a chimpanzee could probably fly one of these things if you taught it basic directions. They have obstacle avoidance. I mean, they've got all these little sensors that you can see. So see
Okay,
those? It's
yeah,
got
yeah.
all on the bottom and two on the bottom, and there's two on the back. So these sensors, there's two in the front as well. So there's a whole
So they
sensors.
can sense if there's an object there, and they have object avoidance sensor.
Yes,
That's
obstacle avoidance. Don't turn it
cool.
off because the one time I turned it off, I crashed it into a Louisiana swamp and
Oh,
almost
that's
lost
not
this
good.
drone. This drone. I was flying and I was trying to get a shot, and the obstacle avoidance was freaking out because there was Spanish moss, and we were on a boat in a
Oh, the
bayou.
Spanish moss, yeah.
Yeah, we were on this boat in the middle of this crazy bayou in South Louisiana doing a thing on the Rougarou.
Mhm.
This was before I was doing the Bigfoot Beyond the Trail. It was a show called Chasing Legends. And it was like the only time I had this drone for 3 years, 4 years at that point. Only time I took the obstacle avoidance off. And I'm getting this really cool shot of us on this barge. We're in this tour and coming back. And then all of a sudden I just start seeing this spinning, and I realize the drone has clipped a tree and has landed in the swamp. My heart sank. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's over, it's done, but it wasn't underwater. The camera, I could still see it. It was upside down,
Right.
pointed at land, and we managed to pull the back of the boat up, and it was it was unbelievable. It landed on the one little tiny patch of dry ground, in a bayou, which is a swamp,
Wow.
and it didn't fall in the water. We managed to get out, and it was close enough that we could basically hop out, use the board to get out over the
Mhm.
water and go and grab it. And I mean, the only thing that
Did
ever
you
happened was I lost a landing a lug. So there's two of these little lugs, and one of them fell off on that trip. But this thing that was in 2020, and this thing continued to serve me up until May of 2022
Wow.
before it started going haywire. So that was the closest call, but that was obstacle avoidance. If I had had that on, I would have been doing that shot. And all of a sudden, I would have gotten this really loud beeping noise on my controller, and the drone would have stopped moving and just
Wow.
stayed stationary. And so, generally, I don't take obstacle avoidance off. There is one mode on here on the newer drone. It's like a sport mode. It allows
Mhm.
you to fly a lot faster. So there's been a few times I've taken it off. When you fly with that sport mode on, you don't have obstacle avoidance.
Okay.
So it's like if you're high up above the trees, 300 feet, that's really the only situation I would use it. And I've only done it like once or twice. My first time using this was when I was in Louisiana back in February. So I mean, I just wouldn't recommend that in general. I mean, most of the time you're trying to get those
Mm.
slow cinematic shots, so sport mode is a
Right.
little too fast anyway. So, but there's so many different settings. I mean, I can't even tell you all the settings that are available with the firmware you can get, and you can, like I
I
said,
was
you can
just
have it
gonna
follow
ask
you.
you
I mean,
I was
everything.
just gonna ask you about that, if you have to, give them, do updates, if there's firmware updates and, software updates that you have to do to keep
Yep.
them.
So DJI has their app that so here's a good example. It says a new version of DJI Fly. It's telling me I
Mhm.
should update it in the App Store. You don't have to with the older models. I know with my older drone, there were certain areas. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I'll say it anyway. This was before I was doing Bigfoot Beyond the Trail stuff. When I was just kind of flying recreationally, there would be certain places where it would tell me, "Oh, this is a little bit of a sketchy area. Maybe you shouldn't fly here." Maybe I did or didn't fly in those situations, but
May or may not have.
with the old one, I could take off in there. But if I was to update the app to one of the newer versions, it would prevent me from doing that. And some of the newer drones have built in once you get a restricted area, you're not allowed to take off in that area. So I won't say
Yeah.
any more specifics than that, but it was a learning kind of process. Like I said, I think a lot of times when you do look at the app, say the Before You Fly app, they'll have like an area that's a really large area that's restricted for whatever reason, that
Mhm.
maybe it's like a few miles from anything important, but they just block off this area. So it's kind of like, I understand it can kind of be a little bit weird. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you should not fly here. I mean, for example, there's this area near Concord, New Hampshire that I'm looking at, and they have like a gigantic radius around them where I should get permission to fly in this area. And I'm looking at that now, and I'm like, all for one little helipad? Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
the rules are the
And
rules.
then
So
through that before you fly app, I mean, in that app, you can register your drone, you can request permissions to fly in certain areas, right? And can't you?
so it's a little bit. I wish it was that easy. Government stuff never can be that easy, right?
Well,
So
I
this,
don't mean in every area. I mean, like, there's
yeah.
certain areas that it's like you have to ask permission, and you can use that app to do that in certain areas,
So it
right?
depends. Yeah. So I mean, with the registration, generally, I've only ever done it on the FAA website, and they make it really easy. You basically just fill it out. Getting a drone certification for pilot's license is a different story. But so I think with this ad, you can technically request permission, but it usually doesn't really go through. It's kind of that's something that would take them a while. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm about to take off here. Do I get permission?"
Well,
Someone
that's
responds
good
to
to
you in a
know.
minute. That would be nice. I don't think that's the case though. I've never done that because I've never
Because
really tried
yeah,
to
I mean,
fly somewhere like that.
I'm glad you said that, because when I was checking that app out, it to me, because I don't have a drone to register or to ask for permission, I wouldn't know. But I mean, I was looking at it and I was like, oh wow, look, you can do this and you can do that. So yeah, so knowing that, that's probably the better way to do it. Not because, like
Yeah,
you said,
it's
it does it.
complicated.
How long does it normally take to when you have to ask for permission or get a permit for an area? Because does isn't there is a whole other layer to it when you're filming and you need a production permit, right?
Yeah, so
You
it's
have to apply for
complicated.
that.
I've never asked for permission for flying with a drone. I've never
Mhm,
flown anywhere where it was a very sensitive area.
mhm.
Like I said, because I even just from when I first started flying, just even recreationally back in 2016 or so, I would just check the app and tell me if I'm good or whatever. So I never had a situation where I needed permission. I mean, I don't imagine there's a lot of scenarios where you need to fly next to an airport, right? Like that's just generally not a good idea. You just probably shouldn't even attempt that in general, even if there's some really great spot next to it. Trust me, it's probably not worth the hassle for getting in trouble.
Right.
And make
Yeah.
sure you do your research if you are planning on doing that sort of thing. But when it comes to filming, it's so because the size typically it's just myself, like another person, or maybe a few people. We usually are small enough of a crew. We kind of fly under the radar, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, so even like national forests, you don't really need a permit for low impact filming. Even in some national parks, low impact filming, which is basically
I was
like
just gonna ask you about that.
under a crew of 5 people, for example, and your only
Okay.
equipment is like tripod based stuff. So you're not bringing in a dolly that you're going to set up a track through a natural
Right.
wildlife area. And so typically we kind of fly under the radar for that sort of thing. So we're trying to be low impact because
Mhm,
I do believe in the whole leave no trace. And when you're out in
mhm.
the woods, I mean, this is just I'm basically going camping or backpacking, but you're adding the element of like documenting your journey. So almost like a vlog sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I look at it. But I've always been that way of really trying to make sure you leave the area as you found it, making sure you clean up after yourself, that sort of thing. Because there's so many times where you get to a campsite or you're out in the national
Mhm.
forest and somebody's trashed a campsite and they've left garbage everywhere, and
Yeah,
it's just a bummer because why
it
why would you
is.
do that? I mean,
I always take extra trash bags, and I
yeah,
always have a
same
couple of
here.
them in my backpack.
Yep, same here because it's unfortunate people like that. But yeah, like I said, with the low impact stuff, we typically are just a couple guys. We're not trying to overload or really do anything like that. And if there's private property and that sort of thing, that's obviously a situation of if you're going out to someone's private property
Mhm.
with them, you're going to get permission obviously from them to say, yeah, it's okay to film here.
Yeah.
uh, and make sure that's all kind of squared away. But yeah, that's the not fun part of everything is dealing with the rules. And like I said, with the drone stuff, it can be a bummer at times. But unfortunately, especially with the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel, we have a not a large channel, but pretty big following. So we
Yeah,
kind
you
of have to be
do.
careful. A lot of people, I think, skirt under the rules, but that's
Yeah.
it's not worth
That's
risking
not your
getting
yeah.
in trouble.
That's right. That's right. Now, do you guys ever have to? when it comes to your equipment, excuse me, and you're traveling, do you have to, like, say you're going on planes and things like that, like with your drones and your other equipment, do you guys have to have them in special like containers so that they don't get damaged or anything in travel? Like if you're up, like if when you flew to Alaska, I mean, did you guys check the baggage or did you take a carry on?
So yeah, usually all my equipment I'm carrying on in my backpack, and I can fit
Mm,
a ridiculous amount of stuff into a backpack. And if I have like a carry-on suitcase or
right.
something, no, the drones we just have. There's like these. Both of the drones I have, they came with these leather, not leather, but
Nice.
it's like a fake leather bag, and it's cushioned, and you put them in there, and it
Gotcha.
basically. I mean, I have it. I think over
Okay.
here on the floor. It's just a bag, and
Mhm.
you can fit all your batteries, your controller, and the drone inside, and it's a pretty small package.
Wow.
Be able to just have it at the bottom of your backpack. And I've never had any issues. TSA, they rarely look at it. I think they're so common
Really?
now.
They
Yeah, I
just
mean,
kind of they're just like, okay, it goes through the conveyor, the X-ray
yeah.
machine. They see what
Uh,
it is and they're like, all good.
I mean, like I've flown dozens of times just with Bigfoot beyond the trail with equipment at this point, and maybe there's once or twice where they've even asked anything about any of the batteries. I mean, I'm flying with,
Yeah.
I've got two thermal cameras in my backpack, two camcorders, a mirrorless camera, then a drone, then a GoPro, and all this stuff in my
Yeah.
backpack,
Mhm.
and no questions asked. The biggest thing I remember when I was flying to Alaska, which was funny, the reason they pulled my backpack to the side was I had this package of batteries of these AAA batteries that I had bought
Oh.
from Best Buy, and it was like a 50 pack, right? Because and they were in this small uh, square box, and so in the scanner, you see all these little
Yes.
things
Oh,
lined up next to each other.
boy.
What does that look like? That looks like an ammo box, and of course they
Yeah.
realize real quick when they see it on the scanner, it looks like ammunition in a box. I mean, you can buy
Right.
boxes of 50 rounds. That's what it looked like. But then they look at it and they say it's just batteries, because we go through so many of the AAAs, because those are what we put on audio recorders. So
Mhm.
like Best Buy sells for, I mean, like 20 something bucks. You can get a pack of 50, and it's like an awesome deal for AAAs that, yeah, I'm just going to use them for one night and toss them anyway, because
Right.
we're going to burn through. They may not be great quality batteries or something, but they work for like the purposes we have. But that was the one time I recall recently getting my stuff looked at, just my backpack, because I had that in my it was
And it
either in my
looked
suitcase or
like,
my backpack.
huh.
Yeah, but all the equipment never had any issue. I mean, usually when
Nice.
I'm flying, I check in a
Mhm.
suitcase anyway, because I'm checking in a firearm depending on where I'm going.
Mhm.
And so that's a whole other kind of process. But it's a good way to ensure that your bag doesn't get lost. Uh,
True.
so so that's kind of there.
True,
But
true. That's one way.
but
Now you
a
mentioned
lot of the equipment is not actually allowed.
mhm.
So, for example, like the batteries on drones, these lithium batteries, you cannot check these into a checked suitcase. This has to be
Oh.
something that you take on a carry-on,
Oh,
because
okay.
the pressurization that goes on in a lot of times when they stow bags in an airplane, they're putting it in the kind of the cargo hole, and that's not as pressurized as the cabin is where you'd be sitting in. So,
Oh,
we're at 30,000 feet. We don't want our heads to pop. Whereas
yeah.
down it's okay for just baggage and that sort of thing. At least that's how I assume it kind of works. But I know you were not allowed to put a lot of those batteries in,
Mhm.
some types of batteries in checked bags.
So you mentioned, what did you say? A mirrorless camera?
Yeah, the Sony A7, which I use, is they call them mirrorless. So essentially, you have like DSLR cameras, which are the larger kind
Mhm.
of Sony cameras. So it's ones that you'd have with a lens on. Mirrorless kind of got rid of a little bit of the bulkiness, and it's basically
Mhm.
just using kind of light that's reflecting off of the mirror internally. So the body of the camera would be very slim. And you'd add a lens on it. So that's the main camera that I use in terms of
Mhm.
like getting interviews, a lot of that sort of
Mm,
stuff. So you get those really nice looking interviews where the person's in focus, but the background's all blurred out and that sort of thing. I get a lot of
okay.
slow mo shots with that. I actually have it up here on the shelf too. One of these guys, I think that one.
So,
Um,
but what is the benefit of it being mirrorless? What does that actually I'm not good with this stuff, so it's fine.
so I mean, it's just the way the technology has progressed. DSLRs were kind of the standard
Mhm.
in photo uh, digital cameras for a while, and
Mhm.
they're less and less now, because I think mirrorless came in. And I mean, there's still plenty of good DSLRs. I was using a DSLR before I switched to this mirrorless one. That's because at Small Town Monsters, we kind of use a lot of Sony stuff. So we're all, this is that Seth's old camera, for example, that I use now for my stuff. So the benefit is, I guess, just there's better quality. I mean, it's smaller, it's less bulky, so I can have the actual body of the camera and I can put a larger lens on it. It's not as clunky as, for example, my old Canon that I had. That was just the body was larger, so you put a large lens on there.
Right.
I'm not super familiar with the intricate details of really what makes it better, but from what I understand, it's just the size is a good one. For example, for me, for the kind of stuff that I do, but it has more to do with the picture quality, because I mean, once you take the lens off, you're looking in the body and you basically have, what looks like a couple of mirrors in there. And essentially on DSLR cameras, it's the same thing. Once you take the lens off and you look inside, and you're seeing these mirrors and these things that reflect sort of the image that you're getting. Then obviously you couple that with a lens, and that's how it sort of kind of comes together internally. So it's a lot of camera mumbo jumbo kind of thing.
I know, but it's super interesting to me. It really is. So does that, when, because I know I've, like even my own self, right? Like there's times all I have is my iPhone, right? Even with my iPhone, I still sometimes I'll like take some photos and then I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a green orb. What is this green orb? Oh my gosh, there was a green orb and I didn't see it. And I could look, it only showed up. And Matt was like, Mom, that was your camera. That was, and then I'm like, oh, okay. Like, does things like do things like that happen to you guys too, where you're like, oh wait, that was a cam, that was a lens flare, or it was the light hitting it wrong, or doesn't that happen to you guys too, where you're like, what the heck is that?
I think at this point I'm kind of used to it. So most of the time I notice that happens a lot is on like smartphone or iPhone cameras. That's where I see a lot of times it happens for whatever reason. It's not something I really
an iPad
pay attention to.
If you're using your iPad or your iPhone or cell phone cameras,
it'll happen. The way the light hits it for whatever reason. And the camera system, I'm not even gonna pretend to understand on the smartphones. Very complex. I'm more used to physical cameras, that sort of thing. But I don't really pay too much attention to weird anomalies like that. And if I can't see it with my naked eye, it's usually not something I'm going to pay attention to. And I know that people say that there's certain things that maybe show up better on like a camera, but when you factor in that camera anomalies do happen, that's kind of a little bit of a, if it's not good, that's not good enough evidence really for me personally. I kind of have a pretty high standard for alleged evidence. So unless I can really verify it myself, I typically won't make a mountain out of a molehill, I guess.
I'm right there with you.
Or an anthill, or however that saying goes. I may have totally butchered that. I probably did, but
I feel really blessed and lucky that I have Matt, that he and I kind of are always bouncing things off of, like, like he had sent me some footage, I don't know, last week or something. And I'm like going through, I'm kind of going through we're both going through that mental Rolodex. Well, could it have been this? Could it have been that? Was this in town? Was this going on? Was that going on? What was, what time of the day? Like, it's like you try so hard. You have to do that. You have to be really super, hyper aware of these other things that could, you have to rule these things out. You have to.
Yeah, I think especially, the light anomaly stuff, that's definitely with cameras, but a lot of times with like the Bigfoot stuff, everyone hates the red circles on the photos. And it's here. It's when it's, most likely just some kind of it's a pareidolia type thing. Our mind is extremely susceptible. I could take a picture right now of really anything, and if I want to see a face in it, I will. Pareidolia, our mind is like hardwired to try to find faces or familiar things. So people see a lot of this stuff, and that's why I think just visual stuff, I have like a very high criteria too, and I've never captured anything I can really say was that interesting in terms of it being aside from
Absolutely.
thermal footage. That's why actually I focus a lot on thermal, because
Yeah.
I think thermals, especially at night, I mean, it's just, it's way different than taking a shot of a forest and seeing a shadow and saying that's a
Yes.
figure. When at
Yeah.
night you're looking at something, and if it's giving off a heat signature, I mean, it cannot escape it. If whatever
Right.
animal it is, it really can't escape unless it's behind a tree, of course. But
Yeah.
if it's there and you wait
Gotta
long enough,
move.
you will see it. Yeah.
Eventually it's gonna move.
Right. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's an area I really like to focus in on. That ties in a little bit to the
Mhm.
drone stuff too. I mean, there's some amazing thermal
Yeah.
drones out there, and I think as time goes on, you're going to see more and more stuff just like this, where you're going to be able to have something like this that's also going to have thermal capabilities. So, I mean, they already have in the Mavic series thermal equipped drones just like this one. I mean, they range like $4,000 to $5,000.
Yeah.
Whereas
I think yeah,
so,
Shane and Shane Carpenter and Randy Harrington, like they got a very expensive thermal drone that
yeah,
they have started using this year. Or I think no, I
yeah.
think they started actually the end of last year, or middle of last year they started using it. So yeah,
Yeah, I've seen a
that's
lot of
pretty
people
interesting.
gravitating towards that. I mean, I know there's a guy out that my buddy Tate Hieronymus knows, and
Mhm.
I've actually met him. I know him too. Never mind, a guy named Damon Irons, and he has a really crazy thermal equipped drone. And I wasn't there when they used it when they were at Bluff Creek this past summer, but he
Mhm.
got footage up in this meadow of this what looks like a black bear, and they had circled it, and it was trying to hide from them, and they could see what it was, and it was really cool. But it was that incredible of a thermal drone. For example, the one we used in Alaska that we had access to was maybe it was like one of these Parrot ones. So the company named
Mhm.
Parrot wasn't all that great. It was really hard to fly. And then again, we had our guy go in the woods and basically disappeared. His thermal signature disappeared. So it just
Yeah.
depends. I think as time goes on, as these other drones have become more prolific
Mhm.
and more affordable and that sort of thing, we're going to see the thermal ones as well. The ones typically that you can get from say DJI that are thermal equipped, they used to come with FLIR specifically, so the company FLIR.
Mhm.
Now I think they're doing their own sort of thing. Um, Sorry, I think my cat was on the at the door or something. Uh, it's not open. It's not closed. He's just likes to mess with the
He's
door.
peeking in. Oh, he's
Yeah,
tree peeking you. He's like,
yeah.
"Hey,
That's just funny.
sick,
Like he messes with the
missing."
door, even if it's open, he'll just want to nudge it open even more. Um,
You're
what
curious.
was I saying? But yeah, the drone stuff, like the ones that DJI ones they market now are more towards search and rescue type stuff, or
Yeah.
people that are surveying certain areas.
Mhm.
So I know even Matt Moneymaker, who's obviously kind of controversial. Some people love him, some people hate him, but he recently has been experimenting with stuff using thermal drones and having an integrated system of communication with a ground team. So this is what they use for search and rescue. I actually watched footage
Right.
from Florida of a search and rescue out near the Picayune Strand Forest,
Mhm.
where they had located, it was like a special needs man who wandered off from his family's home and ended up in
Oh,
the
wow.
woods, and he didn't know how to get back, and they used a thermal drone to locate him, and they had the ground team, and the guy who's piloting the drone, he's in communication with the ground team, so he says subject is to your left, and they're able to move in that direction and triangulate the position. So I've seen videos where Matt Moneymaker has been doing some similar kind of stuff with using this boots on the
Mhm.
ground with drone in the air approach, which I think is a great thing to do. It's something I wanted to do, but I just haven't had access to one of these really higher grade drones. I really hope soon we will be able to get one. But as I mentioned,
Yeah.
as the technology gets better, it gets more affordable. I think it's going to become more. There's going to be more options. It's going to be more available. So that's something that hopefully we can look forward to in the next few years, just in
Gotta
terms
do a
of
Kickstarter for that
right.
piece of equipment, right? But
Yeah,
it's like you said, we're heading I mean, things are just it's rapidly things are just, "Oh, 6 months ago, this iPhone was the best you could get," and it's 6 months later, it's basically not
it's
obsolete,
obsolete.
but I mean, it's you know what I mean? It's like, I'll be paying it off for 3 years, but, in 6 months,
Right.
for 6 months, it was the it thing.
Until they added a new feature, right? And
Well, they brought a new
that's the thing with technology. It's the never-ending march, and especially now with
Yeah.
AI and everything, it's just going to get
Oh,
crazy and
the
overwhelming.
AI.
But I mean, that's where we're in now. So if we can, if you know, it can be
Let's talk
overwhelming.
about that. Let's talk about
Yeah,
that. Let's talk about the influence of AI and filmmaking, especially in this subject matter.
yeah.
What do you think about that? What's your thoughts?
Oh man,
This is a deep
I've
one, I
I
know.
know, I know. It's I've seen some pictures online. So there's a couple perspectives I have, but there's one I've seen some of these, yeah, AI photos that, I mean, look so incredibly good in terms of artwork that it actually really makes me feel bad for actual artists who have these talents that I don't have
Yeah.
in terms of being able to draw. I mean, there's people that I get to do artwork for some of our films where they spend hours doing this beautiful piece of work, and now somebody can just type it into a chat, very specific words, and get something similar to that,
Yeah.
not have to do the wait time on getting an artist. It's, I don't know, I don't like it. I think it's scary. I mean, the
Yeah.
cat's out of the bag. There's no going back from this, by the
No,
way.
no, you're
We
right.
are
It's out there.
beyond the you know, beyond the line of no return kind of thing. But I think, especially in terms of this subject, we're just starting to see some of the AI, and people are falling for it already. I mean, if
Really?
you shouldn't believe everything you see online with Bigfoot in
So
general.
true.
For years, I mean, Photoshop, everything going on, you should not trust what you see online visually. This isn't the 1960s where you get something like the Patterson Gimlin film. If they get anything like that today, it's going to be scrutinized. I mean, anyone who's gotten alleged Sasquatch footage in the last 20 years has been under a lot more scrutiny, perhaps for good reason. I mean, it's so much easier to fake stuff, but now with AI, it's even easier to get photo. Just wait for AI video to start getting more advanced. That's going to be, I mean, the AI photo stuff, yeah, it's here. But once the AI video, they're going to be making entire films that are just AI, and it's going to be scary. And there's going to be Patterson Gimlin level quality of AI video, in my opinion, that's going to come
Yeah.
out, and
I think that's where we're heading for
people are
sure.
going to be
I
fooled
think
by
that's
it for
gonna happen.
sure. So, yeah, the cat's out of the bag. It's going to be, I don't know. I don't think it's so tough because on the one hand, it's like any new technology. You don't want it, you don't want it completely taking over. But then if you impede it, I mean, does that mean you're also prohibiting any kind of actual progression? Maybe something
I
really good can come
know,
out of it.
right?
That's just the technology. It's
The
always going to
double-edged
be there like that.
sword, you
Yes, yeah.
know?
So the AI thing is going to be, I think, unfortunately, with this topic, I mean, people believe all kinds of garbage when it comes to
Yeah.
Bigfoot and cryptids and that sort of thing. So the AI is not a hard thing to imagine a lot of people falling for.
Now, how would we even
But yeah,
begin to debunk that? Like, how would we even be able to tell if it's AI generated? If it's a film that's do you know what I mean? Like, how do we
yeah.
figure it out? How do we even
I
like, I
mean,
mean
you've got to have some kind of software that maybe allows you to see the signatures of it or the metadata if that's available,
yeah,
and if somebody hasn't wiped it or changed it, which is
yeah.
something you can do. I don't
So
know.
you
I
can't
mean,
so
a
that's
lot.
possible to do?
I think it is, and there are some types of metadata you can change. I think there's
Mhm,
some that, and I'm no expert at this at all, but I think, as you know, if you take a photo and you keep exporting it or whatever, and you
mhm.
save it, resave it, take a screenshot, there's ways to kind of mask the original location, at least from what I understand. Maybe I total misunderstanding of it, but that's at least from my little experience I have with it.
Yeah.
But I think there's some types of metadata, like if you're looking at an original photo, that will be there. But with video, it's
Oh,
different.
yeah.
Um, but
A
like, for
video is
example, I know now with AI, the fingers always seem to be messed up. If you look at AI pictures of people, or even a lot of these
mm.
Sasquatch ones, it can't get the fingers right for some reason. There's like a
Oh,
clump
okay.
of digits and a clump of fingers. That'll probably be fixed.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna say it won't be long. They'll be fixing it, but at
yeah.
least that's
So
something for us to kind of think about when we're seeing footage now.
right,
Coming up, guys. Kind of look for things that are just a little off, things that
right. And
should be a little clearer, or
I don't know how advanced it'll get, but I know it's obviously, like I
yeah,
said, the Pandora's box is kind of open. So
yeah,
we'll see how far along it can get. But that's a good. Somebody just brought up fingers and teeth. That's another one. Yeah, the teeth usually are kind of weird too, for whatever reason. I've seen a lot of these AI pictures, whether it be a Sasquatch or even people. It's creepy. where it's like a shark. You know how they have layers of teeth in their mouth,
Yeah. Yeah.
1, 2, 3 layers, and they lose a pair. It almost looks like that, where
Oh,
you have the
really?
multiple layers and just the messed up looking teeth. So that's another way to tell, usually fingers and teeth. But again, that probably will be fixed. I've seen really realistic ones lately that, late night, I see some of these alleged Sasquatch photos and I think to myself, my God, this is so. And then you know what it is? It invokes the feeling of uncanny valley, which is
Mhm.
this strange phenomena, which, if I understand correctly, is basically humans, when we see something that is human like, but not exactly human, we have this uncomfortable feeling that they call the uncanny valley. And I've seen some of these AI Bigfoot photos, and it's given me that feeling of just, this is so disturbing, because it's not, this is not a real creature. This is something that a computer program made,
Right.
but it's supposed to mimic a real creature. I don't know. It's just we're staring into the abyss here, I think, with a lot of this
Well,
stuff.
I never thought I would live long enough to see AI be
Right?
where it is. I really didn't. I mean, when I was growing up, it was, that was like futuristic, right? That was
Yeah.
like going to Space Mountain at Disney World, right? Like
The
that was,
Jetsons, right?
you know what I mean? Yeah, Jetsons. Like that's where I thought, and we're in something that's completely.
It's a
I never
scary
thought
unknown.
it would be. I'm not. I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
even myself as a kid, I grew up in the '90s and the 2000s, and
yeah,
Jurassic Park and all these sci-fi
right,
movies were huge. And they're cloning dinosaurs, and now they're talking about
yeah,
extracting mammoth DNA and from
yeah.
frozen corpses in Siberia. You see some of this stuff, and it just kind of makes you wonder, what is really going on.
Mhm.
It's some of it is just really creepy, like I said, in
It
terms of where
is.
we're headed. And some countries are
Mhm.
actually starting to ban the use of like Chat GBT, which is, or GPT, whatever. There's multiple ones now. There's these
Yeah.
these programs allow you to automate responses. There's a lot of colleges are banning the uses of some of these programs because they can essentially cheat. So what we're going to have is, we're basically competing to see who's going to cheat the most, or who can use this AI
Mhm.
technology to their benefit.
Yeah.
So I saw, for example, Italy. I think they banned the use of one of these AI apps, and then people were arguing, well, now they're going to be left behind because all the other countries in the region are going to be using this to their
Mhm.
advantage. So it's like
Yeah.
the constant progress, technological pull and push that's going on. I think it's, especially with like the cryptid stuff and Bigfoot, I think it's just not going to make our lives much easier in terms of being able to identify things
Yeah.
visually. But when it comes to the text and the chat, all that stuff, that stuff is so different. And I mean, it's going to be a robot takeover. I don't know what scenario doesn't end in that, really, like
Yeah, I know,
iRobot
you're
kind of
right.
thing. At what
'Cause
point
then
do
we
these things
and then
become
we're
sentient?
yeah, and then we're all gonna be feeling like, "Wait a minute, are we really in the Terminator movie right now?" Like,
Yeah, Skynet. I mean, at what point does
Skynet?
it does
Like,
it become does it become sentient and become its own free
because how
thinking
can it
thing?
not? How can it not become that way? And it's like it's an
I don't know.
evolving, constant, updating, evolving thing that's doing this, and it can do it a lot faster than we can. I don't care who you are, how
Yeah.
smart you are, Stephen Hawking type mind, doesn't matter. It's gonna be faster than us, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, you can just absorb the amount of responses that are being given to like a certain social media
Yeah.
platform. There's a lot of stuff about that. Meta with the whole Facebook thing, even Twitter, like Elon Musk talking
Mhm.
about. You, a lot of people theorize, well, he's all pro free speech because he wants to see all the speech that comes in and create that AI algorithm based off of that and have a broad spectrum, as opposed to, say, maybe Facebook, where you're sort of certain things aren't allowed. So it's, I mean, you're using all this input to create something. Is that something going to be
And then
some
there's
kind
the
of
whole
programmed? Is that
A
Skynet?
yeah.
So
Yeah, and there's the whole AI and the Neuralink and the
yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah, it's gonna
we're
be like
gonna
every sci-fi movie ever, which is kind of crazy to
yeah,
those of us that grew up kind of watching that sort of
it's
stuff and
true.
think it
It's so
may be
true.
coming. I don't know. I mean, really, we don't know where it's going to go. We
Yeah,
just know it's going to advance, and it's going to be very interesting over the
gonna have to
course of
keep our
of,
eyes on it.
of our lives. Yeah, I don't. It's starting to affect our lives daily, so it's probably going to
Mhm.
more so be involved in our lives than maybe even most people would be comfortable with.
Yeah, it's already here.
gets very philosophical once you start heading down
Mhm.
into that territory.
We love those conversations here, though.
Technology, it's a blessing and a curse because
Yeah.
I mean, with some of these tools, it makes our lives easier and more interesting out in the woods in these areas where we're completely
Mhm.
disadvantaged as humans. But you see, obviously, as we were talking about earlier, too, the kind of the downside, the the pluses and the minuses. I mean,
Yes.
you have the social impact versus the practical impact and
Yes.
everything that is entailed with that. So yeah, we're gonna be this. Unfortunately, this is it's all here to stay. There's no
Yeah.
going back.
Nope. 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 We opened up the door. It's there.
Yep.
Can't do anything about it. Alex, thank you so much tonight. I really appreciate it. You've really, really given me the show that I was really hoping to just talk about, the films and the equipment and the drones and the I thank you. Thank you for that. I love it. You're an
Yeah. Thanks.
explorer, man. Like I
Thanks for
love
having me
it.
on. It was fun. It's a lot of times, as you mentioned, a lot of the shows I talk about the encounters or the stories you come
Mhm.
across. So there isn't a lot of these types of shows where I get to just talk about the gear. Usually, it's only other people that are maybe other filmmakers, but that's far and few between. So I appreciate you giving me the chance
Yeah,
to ramble on about
absolutely.
my drones and other
Absolutely.
stuff.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. I love that. I mean, I did a show with Robbie Rains where we talked we talked tracking. I wanted
Yep.
to do, like I love to do those kinds of things where I'm just kind of I because I know and for a lot of you guys, the film work is it's why you're out there. It's why you do what you do. Yeah, you're on the hunt or not, I don't want to say hunt. You're on the search looking for these kinds of creatures and cryptids and all these interesting things. It's that's great, but you got I don't know, I guess because my son is a filmmaker too, so I
Right.
see it from a little different view and a different
You
perspective.
understand it. Yeah.
It's an art form and there's a lot that goes into it and it's like, everybody I thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing with
No, I
us
mean,
tonight. Like,
I appreciate it, and it's part of it is just the way my approach is. Not only are we obviously documenting whatever we have happening out there, but this is something I get told so many times, and it really makes me feel really really great because I hear from a lot of people saying, "Oh, it was so visually appealing
yes,
that it really felt like I was
stunning,
there with you guys,"
stunning.
and having the chance to go to a location like whether it be Alaska or
Mm,
South Florida, trying to capture that environment and that feeling is
yeah,
something I'm really conscious of because I think that's just part of the experience. I've watched so many
yes,
videos about places I'll do research on, and somebody's only filming maybe one angle of it, and it doesn't give you a feel for what that area is like. So
right.
I try to kind of holistically capture an
Mhm.
area and at least
You
show
really
people, hey,
well.
this is what it looks like. If I can inspire someone to go out and
Mhm,
enjoy being outdoors like that, that for me is awesome. And I have so many people saying they live vicariously kind of through the adventures and,
mhm,
and bringing joy to people's lives. I've had some incredible stories of people with some, disabilities or terminally
mhm.
sick that,
Yep,
they basically feel like they're coming along for the adventure. And it's definitely something we're conscious of. And it's
and
part of the
that's the feel
journey.
you do you that is the feel that we get from watching your films, and you do. We feel like we're on the journey with you. We really, really do. And so if that was your intent, that is exactly what's coming across to all of us viewers and fans and admirers of your work and you and the whole team and all of Small Town Monsters. You guys are amazing, and I can just you guys are just gonna just keep getting going higher and higher and doing more and more, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where you guys go for the. I mean, what's coming up next? Like, what's your next big journey that you guys have coming this year?
So yeah, oh, next I'm deep in research on British Columbia, as I'll be heading
Okay.
there, and I was kind of mentioning it a little
Yeah.
bit, I think
Yep. You
earlier,
said that
where
a little earlier. Uh-huh.
yeah, so there will be an on the trail Bigfoot film about British Columbia, but
It's gonna
I'm
be
focusing in on some of the First Nations groups up in Canada and
yeah.
that coast region of British Columbia, and you've got
Mhm.
Vancouver Island, areas with some of the richest history of Sasquatch folklore. I mean, I think anywhere on Earth,
Mm, right.
and these areas are incredibly beautiful. So I can't wait to see that. That's the next big trip coming up here. And then in the summer, I will be going back to Alaska for about a month, which I'm super excited for. And
Yes.
pretty much half of that is going to be out at Area A, so-called the cabin. So from
Mm-hmm.
the Alaskan coastal Sasquatch, we're really continuing off of where we left off and trying a lot of new techniques. I mean, I think we're going to go all out this time, really, to
Oh
try to see
man,
if we can get anything
that's
a little more
so
definitive.
good.
And just going back to that location, I mean, it's high on the list. So those are the two big ones that are coming up that are probably going to eat up most of my time for the next 4 to 5 months. So that should be a lot of fun.
Well, I'm excited for you guys, and I can't wait. I can't wait. Now, will you guys be doing the release of either one of those films again at the end of the year, at the end of 2023, just like you did the last couple of years? So you'll be doing that
Yes,
again?
yeah. So the British
Awesome.
Columbia stuff, yeah, will be the end of the year, but the Alaska stuff,
Okay.
our plan is, I mean, basically when I get back towards the end of summer and into the fall, our plan is to have some of that Alaska stuff ready to go. So not only am I doing a sort of series that's dedicated specifically
Mm-hmm.
to the cabin, but there's going to be a couple other Bigfoot Beyond the Trails with some other parts of Alaska I wanted to cover.
Okay.
So our plan is basically throughout the fall, end of summer and into fall, to have uh,
Like a
a
full.
lot of stuff coming out.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Oh, I'm looking forward. I want to go to Alaska so bad. That's like it's on my bucket list, and I'm hoping someday I'll make
Yeah.
it there. But yeah.
It's
Well,
really it's
the
amazing.
and the next time you're down here in Florida, you make sure you hit me and Matt up, and we'll come
Yeah.
and meet you anywhere, and we'll
Well,
hang
because
out.
it's funny because for
I'll
whatever
bring you a
reason,
hot meal.
that would be awesome. With Matt, and I know I talked to him after I went there in January with Tate,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason, I thought he lived up in like the Panhandle, because I know I was on his show in September of this past year,
Hmm.
and I for whatever reason I thought he was up in the Panhandle. I think it's because Stacy's up there, and I kind of
Right.
assumed there was like a group of guys that lived sort of in that area. And then I was in South Florida and he says, "Oh, dude, I live like north of Miami or whatever." I'm like, that's where Tate lives. So, but I didn't connect one and two, and it was a whole kind of mishap. And I'm like, dude, next time I'm down there, like
Next
we'll go to Big
time.
Cypress or whatever in
That's
that
right.
area, you know?
I'll bring you guys some warm food. I
Awesome.
promise. I can't bring you a shower, but I can at least
That's all
fill
right.
your bellies with some warm food, right?
Much appreciated. Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Everybody, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. And Alex, um, again, thank you. I can't thank you
Thanks
enough.
for having me on. Yeah, it
Thank
was
you enough.
awesome.
Yeah. Hang on.